Hi, and welcome to a special episode of Openshift TV. I'm Stu Miniman, and back in 2020, really everything changed. Many companies out there looked at what was going on and said, oh, we need to get in touch with our customers. At the time, I was in the media industry, and we said every company during this pandemic is going to become a media company themselves because, yes, there are media services that you can use, but that we need to understand this. And at that time, Red Hat looked at things, and there was a small group of entrepreneurial people that said, how do we take advantage of this? The technology for streaming is a relatively low bar. We have good content and great community, and they started OpenShift TV. It's a memorable date, especially if, like me, May the 4th is a holiday in your household because, and spoiler alert, it is Star Wars Day. And if you can't guess by my background, yes, I'm a big Star Wars fan. So that was the
Wouldn't
launch
have been able to guess that.
of OpenShift TV. And I want to bring in, the voice of OpenShift TV, the creator of the program, Chris Short. Chris?
Thank you, Stu. I appreciate that intro. And I mean, it is kind of funny that we're sitting here today, 16 months, 18, I can't count anymore. I've given up.
It is
public math isn't my thing anymore.
Days and numbers have become meaningless
Yes.
since I've now been working at Red Hat for a year, Chris. And
Right.
You and I have talked numerous times over Google Meets and Zooms and things like that, but we've never met in person.
Never met in person. Yeah. Yeah.
So can you just, give us the setup, what were you doing at Red Hat, and, what was that meeting like to say like, hey,
Yeah,
we're going to flip on a camera and talk to the world?
So we had a very bandwidthy kind of problem, right? We had a few TMMs and they could only talk to a few customers at a time, right? There's only so many hours in a day kind of deal, and we have to feed these people and let them sleep kind of thing. So we needed to scale that up, and we knew that, we just didn't know how. And then one day our boss, Chris Morgan, was talking to Andrew Sullivan from Ask an OpenShift admin, hey, your kids are doing what on oh, they're streaming their video game stuff on Twitch, and I guess their meeting glitched or something, and then it's light bulb started coming on. It's maybe we should try some live streaming stuff. And so we did. And we set up a schedule for the first week, and we were like, all right, this is cool. But we realized, we can get further into it later on, but we realized that very quickly, right? We had 1,000 followers on Twitch, which was whoa, hello. Okay, cool. And, that was a very eye-opening event, because people wanted us to see, maybe break stuff on, live TV, for lack of a better term. And apparently fixing it in front of them teaches them many things. So we learned very quickly that it was a great learning asset for everybody. And then, we could point people towards, hey, you going to QCon next week, or catching it virtually, that kind of thing. We could still do a lot of the normal stuff we would do as TMMs, right? Hey, getting, our customers to the summits of the world that are out there now, and can still, interact with, normal people like we would at a conference. And so we built out a full schedule of shows. Off we went.
And I guess, for I think most of the Red Hat audience are going to know, TMM is a technical marketing manager.
Oh, yes.
So doing demos, hands-on type of stuff, very different. So when I was at theCUBE, I was doing interviews. It was discussions and analysis segments, people talking.
Right.
The content for OpenShift TV is a little bit different. So
yes.
Live streaming, typically, longer form content,
we avoid slides if we can.
Not slides, but there's a screen up for good parts of the discussion. So, and there's a number of different shows out there. So, how did you break up, hey, is this the same kind of demos that we would have been doing at a KubeCon, a Red Hat Summit, things like that? Or is it just things they're working on? How did the creating the shows, the hosts, and what content got done, how did that get sorted out?
So, I mean, let's take Christian Hernandez. I think he's the perfect example, and he's
And
done
the host
very.
of the Get Up's Guide to the Galaxy, something like
Yes,
that.
yes, 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 exactly. Host of the Get Ops Guide to the Galaxy has really embraced the live streaming format, right? Like, and he said early on, he's like, I want to be the Kelsey Hightower of Get Ops, and I was like, well, hang on tight, buddy, because here we go. You need a show, you need this, you need that, and he's started up the Open Get Ops, initiative, and all these things have happened, and like he's just so great at demonstrating things live on air. And then when something goes bump in the night, he's so great at, troubleshooting it and like saying, oh, this is how you would check this. And, so he's done this amazing, successful job of just making live streaming work for his content. But to answer your question to an extent, right? Like we're all in charge of some component of Openshift. So as new things come out or new features get released, even if they're the UX team's features, why not do a show about it, right? And if you can do a show about it, then we can do some regular cadence to it, and you can get your feedback, from a live studio audience kind of thing, and not studio, but a live audience, and those sessions have been great. The developer experience office hours with Serena from the future. She's got a nickname now, right? Like customer support actually asked us one day, I was in some meeting that I got called into. It's like, hey, is there any way you could like flash this is a future facing feature thing. Don't try this in your cluster, right now kind of deal, because they were getting calls. They were trying stuff. We were demoing on OpenShift TV, and maybe it wasn't quite fully baked because it was tech preview or dev preview and it was missing something, but we had a fix for it in place to make the demo work. So yeah, like our job is to make those demos like as early as possible, and showing them off is, something that we would normally do going from conference to conference to conference, right? Like I would travel quite a bit. So would everybody else on the team. And, so if you're now, okay, let's do a weekly show, let's do a bi-weekly show. So now it's like, oh, okay, I'm doing an hour of solid content, maybe longer if you need it. But I know the exact time and date and what resources I'm going to have available, everything in your home, so it's literally sky's the limit, right? So we have had generated tons of great like demo facing content type stuff. It's pretty awesome.
So Chris, when I first joined Red Hat last year, you and I had a number of discussions talking about live versus pre-recorded. The
Right.
demos, it's not Camtasia. It's not, I
Not
buffed
usually,
it
no.
and polished it and, here, let me hit play and give you a talk over what they're doing. I mean, these are, live, real demos. And talk about why live, the engagement, the audience, what kind of feedback you have, because that's something normally, I've seen Kelsey Hightower speak and he'll go do some stuff. The audience isn't lobbing questions at him usually in real time.
Right.
So
yeah, no, and that has contributed to some of the intimidation factor with some folks, right? Like they can ask questions at any point in time. It's like, yes, but you don't even see them if you don't want to, right? Like you don't have to open the chat and see it. We'll be your filter for you, kind of deal. So, there's three things that we'd like to make sure we tell people, and the liveness of it is core to that. One of those three things is we embrace failure on this channel, right? Like we wholeheartedly accept that things will break. An API call might get missed while you're, firing off 20,000 of them at once, kind of thing, maybe. Yeah, okay, something breaks. Let's go fix it. And that we've gotten two great pieces of feedback, like multiple emails telling us this. Like it really humanizes the brand of Red Hat, right? Like, yeah, we're humans too, folks. Even though we're that quote experts in the box, we can still make mistakes and things still do go bump in the night, and various cloud providers or wherever your home network, whatever you're working on. Case in point, all my network outages this past summer. And then the next thing we've been told is that it teaches people how to troubleshoot, which, if you're watching this right now, you understand how hard it is to learn how to troubleshoot. Normally that only comes through experience. You don't get to see something break live and then all of a sudden people are now diving into this problem to be like, oh, is it this, is it this, and then to see the product kind of unveil itself over the year and a half or so we've been doing this. A lot of improvement has come into the product to make it like easier to use and bringing forward very useful information in a timely fashion. That's we've seen that because of live streaming, I feel like, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So other than the aforementioned, network issues that you were having, what broke? What caused issues? What learnings have you had along those lines?
So I just published a blog post about this because like it had been in the backlog for so long. I was like, I'm going to write this weekend. There was actually like an area wide outage affecting much of the fiber line that runs adjacent to the main road that runs in front of my neighborhood. So they had done some maintenance, and then all of a sudden we get these really weird like interruptions in service, and like it would take down the entire channel sometimes. And we're using remote boxes and it shouldn't do that, but it did. So luckily Bobby, the intern, was here at the time, so we got him plugged into the production systems, and he can produce shows. But it took a lot of, I think it was 5 visits from Comcast Business. Like, keep in mind, like, I upgraded my like level of service with Comcast because of the live streaming, because I was sending out so much content, right? Like the data caps that existed were just getting blown through in the first 15 days. So yeah, outage after outage after outage. I finally was just like, I'm going to build a status page for my house, right? And I go build status.chrisshort.net. And then now I have this thing that I can show any Comcast agent on Twitter, on the phone, anything. Hey, there's been a consistent outage issue here, right? Like something's very bad. And I'm not the only one reporting it, because we're seeing it on, the various social media sites that are out there. And it's like, can you just fix it? Like, that'd be nice. Stop coming to the house. Like, I mean, they had like some orange cord from literally the back side of my house all the way around the back, up the side yard, plugging into the side of the house, because they just wanted to replace the cable to make sure it wasn't that, So it was, I mean, it got so bad to the point where I bought a like MiFi, a 5G MiFi hotspot thing, so that I could, somehow keep the show going while Comcast did whatever during the summer. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it was actually a long-term issue that helped, prove that there was a bigger, wider area issue.
Yeah, unfortunately, any of us that have ever done any streaming, we're well familiar with the speed test site and lots of ways to troubleshoot.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, is it me? Is it something else? Is it the internet? Um,
Yeah, and like
you're leveraging the cloud now for a lot of the activity. So it's not a box, sitting in your home
mm-hmm.
that's doing it. Was that when you started OpenShift TV? When did you switch?
Oh,
How long did it take you to say, oh, okay, I need to, my poor system and whatever graphics
mm-hmm.
card is, cranking to a halt. I need to do something else.
So it
So
was kind of funny, right? Like, I got into live streaming for the Kubernetes community meetings that would happen once a week. And when, when we were like, okay, let's start the channel, I was like, all right, I can do this pretty low budget, right? Like, I had, a Logitech webcam. I had this microphone already because I was doing like a lot of podcasting and stuff. Um, so yeah, I was like, okay, I've got the box for the live streaming meetings that I use OBS on anyway. Let's just go ahead and use that. And that worked for a little bit. And then it was just like, a certain version of OBS, it not having a, strong enough graphics card, that kind of thing. We'd start losing some packets here and there during shows, like especially, if there's a lot of motion on screen or anything. So Eric Jacobs and I worked, and it was mainly Eric that worked very hard to figure out like, where can we get, since OBS is like a first class citizen for Windows because of gaming, where can we get a Windows 10 rig in the cloud? Even though OBS isn't supported in a VM, all we need is a cloud instance with a GPU, technically speaking, right? And so we did this really unsupported thing and actually like productized it. We put it in, it's open source. All the stuff we do is open source pretty much. You can't have the keys to the passwords or anything, right? Like, sorry. But yeah, all we have this all documented, it's all laid out, and you basically you download this repo locally and off you go once you have your Azure account all, plugged in and everything. So it's an amazing, like, necessity problem that we had to solve because it was like Windows 10, not Windows Server, because getting OBS working with Windows Server is a nightmare. So it was just very much like, okay, we got Windows boxes in Azure with GPUs. Let's make this work, and we did. That generation of GPU is now expiring next year sometime. So we've upgraded a generation now. We've been using them so long, and they just work, right? Like they have so many, so many cores and enough RAM to sink a ship kind of thing because they have a GPU, right? They cost only like $1 an hour. So production costs are pretty low.
Yeah. I mean,
Given the
overall,
fact,
if you look at,
yeah,
rather than, dumping a few $1,000s into a machine and then worrying about all of the issues about, single
internet
point of failure on
connectivity and
your
all that fun
site
stuff.
and,
Yeah.
and everything like that, hey, the promise of the cloud, Microsoft, it works, Azure doing great. And yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, Chris, I approve your expense report on that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not free, but it's not, it's not ridiculous for, what we've been doing with OpenShift TV. So
Yeah.
it's
I mean,
interesting to see. And we've been looking at, there's lots of SaaS alternatives out
yeah.
there, and that market has been growing in leaps and bounds.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? Like we're using Restream right now, and I've been poking around on their live studios because they didn't have a live studio until the pandemic hit, right? Like they didn't even think about having one. But then it became a product that they needed because everybody was doing all the streaming now. And, as that, web-based, browser-based platform has expanded, it's been awesome to watch because they just keep adding features, and it's like eventually it's just going to be OBS on the web, folks, right? Like you're not going to dial into Zoom meetings
it's one of this. I mean, Chris, we're leveraging Zoom for the guest management portion of this activity.
It does all of
webinar. There's things like that. It wouldn't be too difficult for Zoom to extend what they're doing into this space. And,
that's very true.
Love to see them, to do some things along those lines. So scaling is something we talk about, Chris. So talk a little bit, how many shows did you start out with and where did it go?
Oh man. I don't even I think we had like a show a day that first week, and then we started building up a normal cadre of shows, right? Like we had an admin focus show, we had our GitOps focus show, but then we wanted a director level kind of show, right? Like director level and on up kind of show where we could talk high level to folks about like important things in the cloud native ecosystem, and how it impacts their organization.
That's the In the Cloud show, which,
right.
Hey, Chris, my smiling face has been on the front page of Red Hat live streaming for a little bit too long, but that's another topic.
I think we have a meeting with them tomorrow morning. But yeah, the when it started off, it was like a Hugo page that I designed, right? Yeah. Like it was nothing fancy or anything, right? Like I was like, this is ugly, but it's the best I can do. Sorry. So eventually like we got a real website, and then eventually became a real Red Hat website. And, it's evolved from, this kind of bootstrap, very much a startup within a company kind of thing into this like smoothly running freight train kind of thing. Chaos some days, like tomorrow, I think there's 4 or 5 live streams total on the channel, including what's new in 4.9 briefing. So don't miss that. Those are always nice to catch up on what's coming down the pipe in the next release of OpenShift.
But total, I mean, you were up to a couple dozen shows at the most,
so I think right? At the peak it was 26 shows. Right now we're running 15 with like a couple extras here and there.
From once a week to monthly or even a little bit longer.
Yeah, we had one show that was on a 3-week cadence. We had multiple shows on bi-weekly cadence. We had multiple shows on weekly cadences, and we had some shows that were like, it's only event based, and that it all works out in the end, right? Like
because there's certain ones that KubeCon or Summit that there were special activities that plugs into too.
Right. And it's cool how we kind of just wove everything together with our events and with our everything else, right? Like we streamed OpenShift Commons gatherings, right? Like we streamed, hackathons for OKD and, like long streams. Like we've done those marathon type streams before. And those are those are great, right? Like if you really want to learn a deep dive into a particular topic, but I like the freshness and the TV style of the hourly show. It works very well. But
Yeah.
sometimes you do need 2 hours to demo something, especially if it's like cloud-based Kubernetes type stuff.
Yeah, and of course it's all available on demand too.
Mm-hmm.
It's always interesting to look at the metrics of something. And some shows have a big live audience. Some of the executive level ones get some nice on
Watched.
demand, and
Yeah.
various pieces that hit there. I know I've leveraged a lot of it. So I've got a lot more questions for you, but I think we've waited long enough, Chris, to share. There was some news that we
Oh,
kind of teased in the pieces
yes.
there. So as you said, it's been well over a year. Many of the shows going through. There's been some reshuffling.
Mhm.
Why don't you share with the audience your news?
So I have decided to take a new role at another company, and I didn't come to that decision easily. A few events had to occur to make me realize that I wanted to do that. And when I say events, I mean like personal events, not like Red Hat stuff, right? Like Red Hat's fine. It's a great place to work. I have thoroughly enjoyed my 3 years here, both on the Ansible team and the Openshift team. But I've decided to take a different path, and I've done that a few times in my career. It's worked out, and sometimes it hasn't. But it's been a good run here, right? Like I feel like I've built up this thing, and maybe it's time to try something else. So
Yeah.
just wanted to let folks know that you won't be seeing me around that much anymore.
Well,
Still
to
be in
that
the
point,
community though.
yeah, you're going to be in the community, Chris. I want to say from the Red Hat team, a huge thank you. You are loved and respected by the team. You definitely live the Red Hat culture. I know you and I have talked, and you just spoke about how really enjoyed your time at Red Hat, and heck, maybe you'll come back someday. We've
Yeah,
seen some boomerangs.
I'm not throwing away any of my shirts
Yeah.
or anything. Yeah.
So, are you ready to tell the audience where you're going?
No, not yet.
Yeah,
I
but
want, I want to
I
take
guess
a little
just the one
break
thing
and
to tease
then,
out is we don't expect that Chris Short will be changing channels and that you will be seeing him on daily,
no,
weekly, monthly shows
no.
after it. But you are heavily active in the cloud native and Kubernetes community. You're
Mhm.
going to be a representative of Red Hat still at KubeCon in LA, and we can expect to see you at future shows of that type in that community, I should say.
Exactly. I'm not leaving the cloud native sphere, right? If that makes sense, right? I'll still be, Kubernetes is going to be part of my daily job. So I will be amongst the clouds with you all natively.
Well, yeah, Chris, it's a chapter. As I said, you've been the voice of and the face of OpenShift TV on a bunch. I've seen in many all hands calls and on some of the corporate channels. Videos, photos. You show up everywhere. So, you've got a long catalog, and I know a little bit about making that shift and having a long
Yeah,
tail of content behind that will live on and continue. So hopefully we will get you back on one of the shows.
I'm
I
sure.
personally,
Yeah.
it looks like at least for the time being, we'll pick up that in the cloud show. We are planning, Christian and Andrew, you mentioned their shows will keep going. They're doing that. We're having some looks internal as to some of the hosting and some of the details on that. But yeah, let's, Chris, would love, some of your, what advice would you give to people if they're starting? What is, when you look back and say, is there anything where you're like, boy, I wish I'd gone to the cloud months earlier. I wish I had done this. I wish I had stopped or started, something and done it a little bit differently.
So I tell this, like, this is an inside joke on the team, right? Like, for any product, there's like an 80-20 rule, right? Like there's 80% of the population your product probably works for, and 20% where, it just doesn't, right? Like whatever your product might be. Kubernetes works for a certain percentage of people out there, and other people are running something else. So I am a 20% use case user of Google Calendar. I feel like not picking on Google in general, because I use like a third-party app to actually manage multiple calendars, but like there's no great calendaring tool, and none of it integrates with anything else. So if it were me and I were starting over, I would have like told my brother-in-law or something, go start this startup, build this product, and let's get rich, because Like if we could automate everything, we could do it all through our calendar because we put all the stuff in there. And it would be great if it just filtered out to all the networks and like, right. Like I would have built something like that if I had the time early
Yeah.
on, maybe,
Look,
like,
I've been a heavy G Suite user for over a decade, Chris, and when people move over from the Microsoft Suite to the Google Suite, that's the one thing that you give them a warning is you kind of expected all the integrations and everything to work with Outlook and
mhm.
the calendaring and everything. The Google stuff just doesn't hit the mark. And oh my gosh, if you have multiple accounts and have to deal
Yes.
with that,
Yeah.
nightmare. I mean, I still keep, two different browsers, one for a personal and one for work, and keep those up on two different windows. And it's better if you can do them on two different devices because, if
Yeah.
whichever one you log in first with just tries to always own that. So, just log out, refresh,
Yeah. I've
try to
got
go
like
back in.
4 different browser profiles that I use between like all the live streaming
Oh
and,
my God.
community stuff and everything else. So like it's, just buckets of organizations
Yeah.
is what it is.
I guess don't want to jump on a nerve here, but when you started OpenShift TV, I believe the expectation was, hey, this would be a fun project for 3 months, and here we are,
I don't even
16
know.
months
Yeah.
later, and it grew into it. So like all of us, it was when does the temporary become the new norm? And live streaming is part of the fabric. It's not going away when you leave inside of Red Hat.
Right.
So anything along those lines that hey, if I had known going into this, would you have limited the number of shows, changed things?
Yeah. I, I definitely would have like put a cap on the number of shows. I don't know what that cap, like, I probably would have just thrown out the number 15 because it's my favorite number anyway. But, you know, I would have said like there's an upper limit here, right? Like
Yeah.
there's only so
What
much
are you talking about?
content.
It's 42, Chris. That's the upper limit.
Okay, 42 hours a week.
No, it's
Hmm.
just 42 is the answer.
That would be a lot of logistical work, right? Like it's
It's
kind of
just
funny how like it's like in the early times we never invite people on the show to talk about anything they don't know about, right? Like it's not like I would invite Stu on to talk about the guts of machine API, right? Like no offense to you, probably don't know. So
that's quite all right. Yeah.
yeah, so it's one of those things where it's like just join us, have a conversation with us. If you need to frame it with a few slides, go ahead, use your 3 slides to frame the conversation, and then let's dive into some things. And I think those shows are like the most engaging shows, but then right, like you do have to have that balance. And I didn't think about that much in the beginning either, right? Like you have to have a balance to address all your audiences, right? Like you
Yeah,
know
and it's interesting, even internally. I don't think people understand the difference between there's a channel and there's all of these shows with their own distinct audiences and
right.
own focus and things like that. It's just,
Mhm.
OpenShift TV is not a monolith. There's
Yeah.
lots of things that go on and hit those pieces. But out of you've done. I don't know if you know how many episodes you've done of all of these various
Oh, it's
things.
over 800 now. Yeah.
That's a ton.
Yeah.
That is there, and you weren't necessarily host on all of those, but
No.
there was way more. I mean, I remember Corey Quinn interviewed me once and talked about like I did like 470 interviews in 2019, and it was like
Mhm.
that's more than one a day. I'm like, yeah, well, when you were going to conferences, something like KubeCon, you do 3 days, and you
Yeah.
go to Amazon, it might be 3 or 4 days, and you could do 10 or 12 interviews in a day.
Mhm.
Those pile up really fast, and then you collapse over the summer and you take some time off here and there. But is there and I always found this question tough, so I understand, but is there an episode that stands out, and are there any guests that you were like
Ooh.
super thrilled that you got on, or you just brought out anything else? So I'll give you a little bit of leeway on those and a couple of categories, and it's okay if it's more than one.
So like we did the mini series, right? Call for Code for Racial Justice. That was like when they reached out to me, I was like, yes, because that's something I'm very passionate about.
And explain that one.
So there's Call for Code. It's a nonprofit, nationwide nonprofit here in the US and I think globally now. And they work on projects kind of like for civic good, basically. But then there was a upswell of racially focused violence in the US not too long ago. And projects were created to kind of help with, analyzing, are sentences fair? are people being, judged the same, way in a fair and balanced manner? And turns out that's not the case. And so there was 7 or 8, I forget how many episodes, 8-part mini series. So eight projects that were all done to help, kind of balance the playing field and not have it, with the thumb on one edge of it to make it, what it is today. And they're making real change and real progress. And I think it was awesome to work with the IBM team on that. And, they have a core team that are working to get, more people involved in their community. And, I highly encourage you to go check out the playlist on Openshift YouTube.
Yeah, and I believe you
get
just had the
involved.
final episode of that, correct?
Yeah, we just did the final episode on Tuesday. So yeah, well, yesterday. Yeah, what day of the week is it? What year is it?
Days don't matter. It's
almost
March,
2022.
March 2020 is almost done, and we'll flip the calendar to 2022 here before we know it.
Yeah.
Yikes. So that's awesome. I mean, Chris, one of the things, you've been active in the open source community. The tech for good stories are always great to hear. I've and I too have called out interviews I've done and discussions I've had. Some of them, Red Hat customers would how they track and do things around COVID and the like. How about from a guest standpoint? I mean, you've done some high profile executives. You've had some brilliant people down in the weeds. Give us a couple that kind of stand out as you, as either excited you or interest you, or you learned something.
So like the interview with Stephanie Shiris I did last year was like the most intimidating interview of my life. Like for folks who don't know, like Stephanie has she speaks multiple languages, has multiple degrees, like doctorates, I think. And
yeah, she's a PhD. She's brilliant.
She's an amazingly smart person. And here I am. Oh, they're like, if you look, there's my community college degree, diploma over there, right? Like it's so like I made sure that I worked with her executive assistant to flesh out the questions and and like bounced it off of Chris Morgan at the time, and it was like, hey, I actually told him like, hey, I'm feeling a little intimidated by this. And he actually called me that morning because In the Clouds is usually on pretty early. So it's called me that morning. He's like, hey, just give me a pep talk. And I was like, okay, cool. But that was a really fun interview. That was last year.
Yeah,
go check that out.
Stephanie is awesome. So I had the opportunity. It was funny, she was an IBMer for I think
number of years.
Something like that, and had been over at Red Hat less than a year before the acquisition. And I remember talking to her after, and it was like, did you know, was it your part of it? And it was like, no, Stu, I didn't know. But yeah, she's brilliant. And does she throw you with the Boston accent though, Chris, a little bit?
It does. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, but I live up in the area, and yeah, she's phenomenal executive and just so good, and a fun conversation. It's one she does, and does a lovely job making sure her backdrop looks there and super well branded.
From a in the weeds perspective, Stu, I gotta hand it to Scott McCarty. Okay. But I want to give an honorable mention to Rob Zumsky, because he actually brought his CNC machine via video onto the channel. So that was pretty cool. But anytime Scott McCarty came on, he would just be like, he would dive so deep into the topic. It's like, see, it's all just file system stuff. It's all just files on disk. Like containers are nothing but files on disk. Blah, 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 blah. Run CC run. It doesn't matter what runtime you're using. It's all just files on disk. And it's like, oh, okay, I understand that now. So like you'd walk away from those conversations with a depth of knowledge that you just did not have before.
Well, right. And Scott and Rob both, I had the chance of interviewing both of them on the Cube too. And it is rare when you have someone that really understands the depth of that, but can explain it to a point where the layperson who, I don't know my file systems inside and out, and, don't think about that other than, when I plugged in a backup drive, I have to choose.
Right. Yeah.
But he explains it and you understand it. So yeah, no, those are good ones there. Yeah. How about your set? You said you had the mic, any things, how did you build out the backdrop and,
so
some of the pieces?
This all started in my unfinished basement, right? So my actual backdrop was a concrete wall. It didn't look that great. So back then I just hung up a bunch of flags because they were like $4 for like the most expensive like college flag I could find. And like it was like I had a Star Wars flag, I had like state flags for every state I lived in. I had a college flag for where my daughter was going to school, and like that was cool and all, but there's actually like inspectors coming today because we're finishing the basement. That's why I'm now in our former guest room. A pandemic means you don't have many guests over, so that kind of works out. But you know, there's a standing desk that's very wide, 72-inch wide desk where all the stuff can just sit on. So I've got a UPS, I've got a subwoofer, I've got a TV, Apple TV with a monitor over there. So I can actually watch the live stream like live as if you were watching it. But yeah, there's 3 monitors, including the laptop monitor. Stuff happened like the virtual machines over here. I got notes over here, all the comments, and Zoom is in front of me. There's 2 lights that are bouncing off the wall. You know, there's a very it's a used Sony A6000 camera with a Sigma 30mm lens is probably the nicest part of the setup, right? Like I actually spent money on the camera and the microphone. That's a
And then
very
behind you,
expensive microphone too.
you were nicely well branded.
Yeah. So
And,
the funny thing about when I was in the basement was like it was like, okay, turn around, and it's like my back desk, which was like my personal work desk. And we basically just brought that up here because it has this nice fireplace, and I could totally throw a Red Hat up full screen for when I'm doing live streams. So why not?
yeah.
And like the fireplace in the background thing was like a mental thing for me because if you recall polar vortexes, I'm in Michigan. We got nailed by some of those. It was like 42 degrees one day in my office. And like, I was like, okay, fine. I'm going to, you know, not have all the stuff that I need for this one, you know, period of time. I'm going to have to be in the basement to live stream though. So the fire came on and it just gave me that, you know, psychological feeling of, hey, maybe it's a little bit warmer in here, but I had a space heater down there and all this other stuff that got upgraded that day. But yeah, it's a lot. And like, I fully embraced the USB-C mantra as a result, because you kind of need that level of speed to make all this work, right? Like if I tried to do a demo on top of everything else I'm doing right now, my computer would start to slow down. Like you would notice it visibly. So yeah, it's you got to have your ducks in a row kind of thing. If I was going to do like a demo, I would actually throw production onto like my iPad and use the remote desktop client available for iPad OS to log into that box and manage, you know, stream on, stream off, that kind of deal. And having that flexibility is great, but it's a lot of gear sitting on the desk because it's not just a microphone, right? Like it's a microphone, it's a cloud lifter, you got to have something that converts it from XLR to USB-C, you know, and it's just and you never want to lose the data that's on your disk because you might be in flight working on a video redo and like constant backups.
It is one of those things, Chris, that, you know, yes, I could grab this and I could
you can go live on Twitch with just that. Yes,
you know,
no problem.
But you know, you keep adding pieces and it keeps adding complexity, and it's you know, troubleshooting all of those things and making them all work. So yes, you know, empathize. And it's funny. It was like I always think my experience for like building a stereo system from components, you know, back when I was like in high school, is something that some of the new generation doesn't know.
Right. Like my freshman year in high school, I took electronics class, and I still use stuff from that today for this job, which is pretty cool. Right. Like that was very forward thinking of myself.
Yeah, but you know, everything from the physical layer, like wait, like let me text connections, to you know, the you know, my networking background has helped me with troubleshooting. It's like, let me understand the flows, let me understand where I can test things. You know, do I have 3 different places I can put my headphone jack to make sure that it sounds the right way? Because you definitely have the things. It's like, okay, wait, my inputs all seem fine, but there's something wrong with the stream.
Right. And early on, that's how we knew, right? Like we kept having these little bumps on the night kind of thing, right? We didn't know what happened. Zoom just flaked out on the box for some reason, right? Like who knows? But also like early on, like Zoom didn't necessarily work with Linux very well. And that's what I was using on that box. And So like having Zoom as a communication layer was fine, but there was some stuff that like annoyed me a little bit, right? Like you had to do some extra stuff for Linux, mainly use Xorg and not Wayland. And that, has sorted itself out over the year and a half or so and isn't a problem anymore. But those like little nitpicky stuff like that, right? Like that happens with this, that happens with the box it's connected to, that happens with the computer, that happens with the camera, that happens with the HDMI thing to go from the camera into the computer. So yeah, you're taking all these basically analog things and digitizing them and then shooting them out over the internet. It's not trivial when you really like get into live streaming if you want
Yeah,
to do it
but
right.
Chris, if I hear, from our conversations here, um, while it hasn't been perfect, you've enjoyed a bunch of those things,
Yeah.
and getting to know and play with it. You've
Yeah, it's
hacking and doing that. So, what's it meant to you to be, OpenShift TV?
well, I mean, it's been a real honor, right? Because we didn't know how far this would go. We really didn't. And the fact that it became like my day job was, you know, a real tantamount to like its effectiveness. So it's been a real honor to bring my team's content, other people's content from throughout the company, throughout IBM, from other companies, our partners. It's just been a real honor to just be able to deliver that and give a platform to voices that normally wouldn't have had one otherwise during the pandemic, um, or would have had to have one in a virtual event, which you and I know is sometimes not as easy to pull off as a live event, which, it that is kind of the niceness of it being live. You just do it once and you're done. You don't have to perfect it. Some imperfection is totally expected. And like I said, we embrace the failure and of all
Well,
types.
it is actually one of those, not so secret secrets. If you talk about doing a live stream, is Chris, how much post process editing do you do on all the OpenShift TV shows?
None.
Yes, and anyone that's done any video, I have some friends that are in, TV and movie type businesses. Oh my gosh,
It's all editing.
right.
Yeah.
Not only could you spend, hours to try to, record properly the 5 minutes that you
Mhm.
want, but then the poor people that have to do the post processing, usually it's at least 3x the amount of time based
Yeah.
on the length. If you're doing a podcast, it's not nearly as much, but still that's a little bit of, cutting things down and doing
Yeah.
this. So if you can record and then just hit publish, that does save huge amounts of time.
And that was something I actually learned while I was like goofing around with video stuff back in the early 2000s, was that like, yeah, if you could record it, it took 3x to edit it. And I did not want to be in that situation, right? Like I didn't want to become like video editor, right? Like I didn't want to be that, particular person that needs like the Mac Pro or whatever, the ridiculous box. So that's why I insisted on live to an extent, right? Like we don't do replays, we don't do, anything like that. It's live only kind of thing. And it works. People appreciate it.
All right. Well, Chris, what give you the final word? What's the audience, the community meant to you, and will continue to mean to you going forward?
I mean, like I said, I'm not going far, so I'll be around. The audience, I think, has been great. We've had everybody from a junior, like college student, well, like a junior developer slash college student, to like seasoned government workers that use OpenShift come on the channel, and we've helped them solve problems and educate them on things. And that I think has been the most rewarding and fulfilling thing. And then just getting the voices of all the people out there, right? Like that means a lot to me, to be given that responsibility and then to be able to actually pull it off, I think is like a real honorable thing. And I feel humbled by, when I look at the numbers every month and it's just like, wow, I did that. Me? Wow. So it's been a very, very much a learning experience for me, a growing experience. And I will miss the people for sure the most.
Well, as you said, Chris, you'll still be in the community. We still look forward to talking with you and keeping in touch. So while it might not be on this channel for now, we will see where it goes. So thank you again. Great to be able to talk with you. Share those lessons learned with the audience, because that's a lot of it is sharing that and learning from it and building on it. So thank you, Chris. We will. You and I will both be at KubeCon in person, and then
Yes.
you will be sharing with us soon after that where you'll end up. I do recommend everyone do check him out. Chris is super easy. He's Chris Short on the Twitters.
Yes.
He also has a newsletter on Kubernetes that I recommend that you check out. And thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Stu. And check out our schedule out tomorrow, folks, if you haven't yet. I got to do my thing for just a second, Stu. Got a busy day tomorrow live streaming, so please check out the calendar, hit what you want to hit, and we'll see you then. Stay safe out there, folks.